Today on the Authors Exchange, we sit down and talk to the author of Save the Tomatoes for Packy, Daniel Doherty.
And I'm waiting for your interview, buddy.
Okay. We got to find somebody to interview me eventually. We talked about that before.
Well, we'll get somebody
down the pipe.
We'll get somebody big, Oprah or somebody.
Well, maybe Oprah. Well, is Oprah right? I don't know if she's an author or not. I know she probably has a book out there, but I bet it's
Lord, yeah. Hey, all I know is when she ran the Marine Corps Marathon, I knew I had to beat her or I'd never hear the end of the firing.
He beat Oprah. That is the most important takeaway of this entire show. The man beat Oprah in a marathon. The Authors Exchange. Your host, Captain Christopher German. Brought to you by The Charted Life. And sponsored by Whither We Tend, a novel by Captain Christopher German. Welcome to The Authors Exchange. Hey there, this is Captain Christopher German coming to you for the Authors Exchange. It's a weekly program we do once a week on Fridays at noon. And you can get this on all the major sites where you can download podcasts. It's also available on YouTube. And this week we have a very, very special guest. It's one of the first books that I read when I joined the Authors Exchange. And one of the reasons why it was such a compelling book and it stuck in my head so much is I had a tough time reading it. It was not an easy read. And you know what? That's what good books are supposed to be. They're not supposed to be popcorn that you can smoke through in 10 minutes and not get anything out of. And the fact that this book is about has a lot of military in it and has a lot of other things going in it that really are salient to our commonalities today. I really thought this is one very important interview that I really wanted to get in on this particular podcast. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the guy we have today. His name is Dan Doherty, and he is from Albany, New York. He has had a varied career path, including serving for 33 years on the Albany Fire Department, retiring as a captain paramedic. Dan served in the U.S. Army and Army Reserve for 14 years, and he's currently a warrant officer in the South Carolina State Guard, has been a full-time faculty member at Hudson Valley Community College in Troy, New York, as well as lead instructor at the State University of New York at Cobleskill in their respective paramedic programs. From 2010 to 2011, Dan served as a paramedic for the Saudi Red Crescent Authority in Riyadh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and he's an avid runner, has completed over 100 marathons and ultramarathons, and this is his first novel. He now resides near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, with his wife, and I'm sure it's very lovely down there right now in South Carolina land. But right now, we have Dan to speak to. Dan, tell us about your book and start with the name.
The name of my book, and thank you for having me, Chris.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you.
The name of my book is Save the Tomatoes for Packy. And it sounds like a strange title. I know it does, and there's a reason for that. As Chris told you, the book's a little hard to get into, and it was one of three alternate titles. One title was going to be Sundogs, one title was going to be The Shadow Box, but Save the Tomatoes for Packy is covered in chapter 2, and it explains two things. It explains Paul's lower middle class Irish American upbringing, and it explains his girlfriend's understanding and empathy. You'll find, and hopefully that's why we kept the chapter that the editors really wanted The Shadow Box or Sundogs, but I kind of stuck with Save the Tomatoes for Packy, and I hope it works out. It worked out for me. Packy, for those of you who don't know, is the Irish diminutive of Patrick, and Irish people can't leave names alone. If you're Teresa, you're Tessie, and if you're Catherine, you're Kitty. And so the main character here is Paul Fogarty, and you can't really do a lot with Paul, so they call him Paulie, so that'll do all right. Paul's on a journey. Paul's on a journey to go to a cemetery in upstate New York, Western New York, and his journey is to terminate his life, suicide, and to him and his convoluted thinking, or at least maybe to the reader with convoluted thinking, this is his ultimate act of contrition, and he's planned this very well, and he's doing this as a sober, supposedly rational decision. En route to the cemetery, he reflects on what caused him to choose this in his life. And in reflection, he thinks of his lost love, and we get quite detailed with his girlfriend, and who has since died, and we get to know some of his army buddies, and the army buddies. He didn't realize what an important part of his life they were until he reflects. When I don't want to give away any of the plot, but when he gets to the cemetery, he meets an old man walking his dog. And that's where the story, about half the story, gets really interested. And this old man shows him a much better way to remember his past by building a shadow box and putting items and totems and memories in the box. And it gets very detailed. And I had a lot of fun writing it.
Well, let me jump in there, because part of the things that I do with this podcast is I read every book before I get them on here. And Dan and I talked online, and we traded books. I'm author of Withery 10. He's been reading my book. I read his book, and we share reviews, and it's part of the authors exchange. And that's kind of how this whole thing works. But one of the toughest things I did is I agreed to read this book because it challenged me, and it challenged me in a way that I don't think I was fully prepared, because I have a little bit of a military background, and it dug into my head about my positioning on the Vietnam War. Paul is a Vietnam veteran. It dug into my positioning on life choices. It dug into a lot of my own personal feelings on these things, and it did it in a very uncomfortable way. And you tell me, Dan, that you did this intentionally. You gave it a very uncomfortable feel from the start, because Paul's life is uncomfortable. Is that correct?
Yeah, I want to make one thing very clear here. I got drafted. I volunteered for the draft when I was 18 years old. I was one of the lucky few who got sent to Germany. I fully expected to go to Vietnam. I never went to Vietnam. I did finally, after a year in Germany, I put in a transfer request. They said, well, you can go if you sign up for an extra hitch. I wasn't going to do that. So I took Paul and created Paul. What would happen if he didn't have to get the extra hit? That's where I took Paul. So that's made up. I was never in Vietnam. And my story, almost all my friends, my brother, they were in Vietnam. And I always had kind of a survivor's guilt kind of thing about that. So that's why I put it in Paul's life. This is not my life. It's Paul's life.
Uh-huh. Well, and that's one of the nice parts about being an author, is you can kind of take some of your personality and put it into characters, and take some of your life and put it into characters, and mash it up and say, what if? And I think there's a big what if here in Paul's character, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, Dan, is because I got the sense that you saw a lot through Paul's eyes, and a lot of your feelings came through in Paul. And can you talk a little bit more about, what was it like kind of exploring these darker thoughts through a third party?
Well, I started writing this book 9 years ago in Saudi Arabia, and there's not a lot to do in Saudi Arabia. It's run on sand dunes, and that's about it. So what I tried to do when I do it, I thought it would be cathartic. I thought it would be cathartic to get these thoughts out. Turned out to be, instead of cathartic, it turned out to be epiphanous, because I discovered so much about myself through the characters. And the character Bobby Ray is actually a combination of two guys I know who lost their legs and ended up, unfortunately, they're both deceased now. Terrible PTSD afterwards. And the conscientious director in there, Posey, is an actual conscientious director that I served with, who ended up getting killed in Vietnam. Johnny Polito, another guy who didn't have to go to Vietnam. He was in Germany. His brother was killed there. Boom, another guy. These are all real people. These were real people, and I kind of, I fleshed them out a little bit and had to add things. But it actually made me sad. It made me very sad to remember, to find out that in a way it's a love story, because I really loved those guys and I didn't even realize it.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about another big character in this book, where love comes in, is Cathy.
Yes,
did you have a Cathy in your life? And
I absolutely did have a Cathy in my life, and probably the closest true to form is what Cathy, yeah, because she was just a remarkable person, and who just unfortunately, died at an early age. And I, when I was 20 years old, I was out and of the army, and you know how things were in the 60s and 70s, and they were more interested in boozing and gambling and fighting and doing Irish stuff than you really weren't paying attention to what was going on around you as far as love and relationships went. And then you come to realize, and it's way too late. Fortunately, I have a lovely wife, and I love her very much. We've been together over 40 years, so.
Well, that worked out, didn't it?
I had some explaining to do with the book.
I keep having that problem with my wife. I write female characters, and she's like, that's something I said. Why are you writing that in the book? And she yells at me all the time.
I got you.
Author's perspective, I suppose, right?
And I wasn't trying to deify her. I think as time goes on in your mind, you tend to deify people and place them on a pedestal that maybe, you're not giving them the clay that they might have really had. That's my prerogative.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the first break right now. So we're going to take a couple minutes to pay some bills, and we'll come right back. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you to read a few words for us. Are you willing to do that?
Sure. We're glad to do it.
Okay, well, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this message.
Okay.
On the Authors Exchange, we're trying to talk to some authors about their books, but every once in a while, we can help you with your relationships. Men everywhere, if you're looking for something that you need to entertain your wife with, and you want to find something that is going to touch her heart, this, I think, is a great opportunity as such. Get the book, give it to her, write your name in it, and say, you know what, Daniel gave these poems to me, and I'm going to give them to you, and it'll get you out of Dutch if you're in Dutch with your wife.
I tell every guy I know, use this book.
Use the book. More than a century ago, Kenneth Ransom set out to sail the Great Loop of the United States. He did it in a boat he built himself with a couple of his friends, and he thought, you know what, this is just a cool little way to get around the United States. Well, he set up an entire industry, an entire world that people have been exploring ever since, and they've written at least 100 million books about it of all different titles. Well, we're going to make a movie about it, and we're going to call it The Great Loop. It's going to be a docuseries that involves 5 teams of sailors that we're going to select, teach them to sail, and put them in a brand new Catalina 42, just like this one. Well, we're going to hope that you like us on Facebook because it's coming down the pipe, but we're trying to find some help to make it happen. So give us a like on Facebook at The Great Loop Movie, and if you'd like to get involved, send us an email at info@thechartedlife.net. I'm Captain Christopher German for The Charted Life, and we are getting ready to set sail on the Great Loop. Hey, and welcome back. I have with me today Dan Doherty, and he wrote Save the Tomatoes for Packy. It's a book about a Vietnam veteran who has gone through life, and he has a lot of regrets. He's got a lot of pain, and he's got a lot of challenges that he has to overcome. And part of the way this book is written, it's written in a very I'm not going to say confused. I don't think it's confused, but it's a jump around thing, the way the human mind works when it comes to memories. And it is the experiencing of these memories that Paul experiences that eventually leads him to say, you know what, I think I need to end it all. And I'm not giving away any spoilers here, according to the author. You really need to check this book out and find out what happens, because Paul doesn't kill himself, and he really has a come to Jesus moment at the end of this book. So, but while we've got him here, let's hear some of the words of this book in the author's voice. I love doing that in this show because you get to understand the inflections and how the voice sounds in the author's head when he reads. So, Dan, you picked a passage out which you'd like to read. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have one passage. The character Murphy, who's Peter Murphy. This is the old man that Paul meets in the cemetery when he's getting ready to do his Dutch act. And so I wrote this paragraph concerning Murphy, but I want you to know that I wrote it, and I tried to write it in the kind of vernacular that Murphy would use as a World War II vet.
Yeah.
So here's this is from the chapter. A bleach store stinks too much. Which you got to read the chapter to find out.
Okay. Fire at will.
Okay. Murphy had been around. He knew the score. He wasn't always a dog walking chatterbox. The old timer was a smart guy and a hell of a soldier. Back in the big one, W.W. Deuce. He had seen death in many ways, and he knew the value of life. It wasn't a choice from Murphy. It wasn't anyone's right to take any life, especially not one's own. When the unit that Murphy served in liberated the Dachau concentration camp in April 1945, Murphy was one of the first to enter. He saw the walking skeletons, saw the crematorium, only partially covered by the corpses only partially covered by freshly fallen snow in the boxcars, naked. And freakishly, he saw the sundogs on that day, guiding him to the crematorium. Sundogs are a very big, a consistent factor in this movie. Sundogs represent hope beyond come from the sky.
Yeah, it's almost like a divinity. They shows up. It's God's own voice when it comes through in the reading. You hear the spirit come through, and it's just a weather event. And I'll put a picture of what a sundog looks like up when I edit this video together.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about that. Yeah.
Well, but yeah, and you've got some great review questions in this book as well for academics to take a look at it as well. And the sundogs features prominently there. Why did you choose the sundogs? It's not. I've never even seen a sundog in person. I had to actually Google it when I was reading it. So why did you choose sundogs as such a prominent feature of divine intervention in this book?
The truth of the matter is, I was sitting on a hill behind PS 21 time, getting ready for my Little League game, and I was all nervous because I was pitching that game. And lo and behold, I saw sundogs, and they were huge. And I said, it was God telling me I was going to do okay in that game. And you know what? I pitched a no-hit, no-run game. That's a true story. So I've always been fascinated with sundogs.
Did you? Well, obviously you did it before the internet. How did you know that they were sundogs? How did you get that information in your head?
Well, when I finally started reading a book, I discovered what they were. And I'm one of those guys like yourself. If I don't know what a word is, I look it up.
Yeah,
And I say, oh, that's sundogs. And all my life, especially down here in Carolina, sundogs are all the time. I run on a beach spot. Oh, yeah. And I still love sundogs. I still love to watch them. It's just a rays of light coming through the clouds.
I'll have to find a video of that and share that on this because they are a very prominent part of this book. But and I think it's an answer to another large prominent part of this book, which is death. And that was one of the things that struck me really from the first page all the way through is the prominence and the closeness of death to these characters. And they kind of take it as just a kind of a passage of life. It's just a thing that happens. But I think for so many of us, we don't think of death as being that close to us. But in this book, these characters, they really have, from Cathy's experience with it to his army buddies' experiences to Murph and eventually to Paul, death is so close. How did you come to that?
Well, that story played itself out. That story wrote itself because it dawned on me that all these guys and thoughts that I had, they all died. And it hit me, it didn't hit me until I was sitting on a sand dune in Saudi Arabia writing this. And my God, you can't write this book, Dan. Everybody dies. But death is just that part of life. I tried to put some humor in there with comic relief, with sarcasm. I put a character in there, Barney the dog, and I did that to humanize Murph because Murph was coming out as too stereotypical, iconic World War II vet, and I didn't want that. So I gave him a dog, Barney, so that we humanize him.
You gave him a racist dog, or not an ethnocentric dog, didn't you?
Yeah, he's a xenophobic dog. Yeah, absolutely.
You got to read it because Barney is very selective in where he decides to defecate, and he does it entirely for political reasons, unfortunately. But hey, dogs can do crazy things. I got one dog that will only face one direction to go to the bathroom. So hey, there you go, right?
I like that. I thought it would humanize Murph a little bit, and provide a little bit of comic relief. I tried, even with sarcasm and the sarcastic humor. I tried very hard to, bring a little levity into a grim situation.
Well, and I think that's the way that the levity I think is received in this is kind of a macabre sort of way, where. Hopefully they're not giving too many spoilers, but the fact that Paul gets locked out of his car in the end when he's trying to do the ultimate, and that's just an irony there that I found. The guy's just not had an ounce of luck in his life, and he tries to kill himself, and he locks his keys in the car. I mean, it's like that's just that's dark stuff, man.
I'm glad you like that. I'm glad you like that. That was tough. It was tough that how was I going to transfer Murphy over to get the keys in his car, and so he couldn't get his shotgun and leave a note with the trophy shop, and it worked out well. I think it played out well in the story.
Well, and as an author, I think you this is one of the things I like is about this podcast. A lot of other authors read this, and particularly independent authors that are thinking about writing their books. And that is one of the, I think, the big takeaways that I have learned from writing, and I hope you share this with me, and maybe you could talk a little bit about it, is the book has a life of its own. When you get to, say, the 10th chapter or whatever, it's you're looking to write the 11th because you don't know what's coming next, and it just kind of does its own thing. I compared it to raising children. You put it there and you start it, but you never know how they're going to turn out.
And yeah, I agree with you. I love authors reviewing authors because your family, your friends are going to read. It's great. It's wonderful. It's a great book. Then, they're not really going to. But when a couple of stranger good reviewers had read it, like my editor, I had a terrific editor, and she said, this guy, Posey, this conscientious objector who actually decides to go into service and not be a medic, goes wherever God wants him to go, learns how to shoot a rifle and everything else. She said, you have to flesh him out. I actually gave him 2 chapters.
Oh, yeah?
Because and you're right, boy, flesh this guy out. And he becomes probably one of the most popular characters of the book.
Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit about your editing process.
Okay.
How did you get into the writing thing? I mean, obviously you're a military guy. Last week we had a cop that turned into a young adult novelist. You became a really serious adult novelist from a career being a paramedic. How did you make that path over to this?
Well, initially, when I was in the fire department, I started teaching paramedics at a local college. And that led to reviewing textbooks. And that led to me writing chapters for textbooks. And I discovered that I could do very well writing nonfiction. I made good money. I wrote chapters for textbooks, medical textbooks, hazmat textbooks, fire science textbooks. And I was good at it. But one of the editors that I had at Jones and Bartlett said to me, she said, what we really like about your chapters is your sidebars because they're so interesting. Did you ever think of writing fiction? And that was really the key. So it was a regression from review, writing textbooks to writing fiction. And I not only found out I was good at it, I enjoyed it, and I felt I had a story to tell.
Yeah.
And I still have stories to tell.
Well, and that's the thing I think is so fascinating about getting the chance to speak to you on camera about this book is you've had a hell of a life. You've had, done a lot of different stuff. You've been an incredible character in your own story. And to have part of that story spill into the pages gives the reader just a little bit of a hint about that. And to find out, you can chronicle all that now. I kind of feel very lucky the fact that I get the chance to talk to you.
Well, at 72, yeah, you believe me, you get there was a lot of years of experience. The years that I remember, there was a few years that were a little shady, but I'm only kidding there. That was, I think you can deduct that from the book. Yeah, like for example, my next book is going to be The Sugar Shack's on Fire. It's going to be a Captain O'Brien remembered his 33 years on the job on a fire department and the different firefighters that came through, the funny situations, the sad situations, and that book will write itself because I just have a ton of fire stories that I just got to combine them, and I think it'll be a lot easier. I was going to write a darker book, but I'm done with dark. At least for the next book, it's going to be and something I'm of course very familiar with. Funniest guys in the world, greatest guys in the world are firefighters,
Well, and that's the thing is if you mix an Irishman with a firefighter and then stick a little military in there, the stories that are told, they'll blow your hair back, won't they?
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm going to have to be very careful when I write the book. Don't have to run through a few lawyers before I put it out there. I don't want my buddies suing me. So hopefully
all the names were changed to protect the innocent and to indict the guilty, right?
Well, there's going to be, let's face it, it's Captain O'Brien is one that's had review. So right away, I'm throwing the Irish right in.
That's awesome. All right, let me take one more break.
I'm not in a state guard anymore, as you can see by my hair. Okay.
Well, let me take one more break. And when we come back, we're gonna talk to him about the writing process a bit more and how he got into, how the whole book came to be, and talk to him about what his advice is for other authors. So stick around. When you come back, we'll talk it and we'll figure out why you should be publishing your book, because it's gonna. I mean, this is a great book for inspiring you to write your own book. Tomatoes for Packy coming back right after this break. All right, we're talking with Dan Doherty today. I'm Christopher German for the Authors Exchange, brought to you by the Charter Life Television Network. And today we're talking about Save the Tomatoes for Packy. Dan's a Vietnam or a war vet. He was in Germany during Vietnam. I don't want to misspeak, but he served in the military for a whole bunch of years. And he's been a paramedic, and he's been a firefighter, and he's been all kinds of amazing things. And now he's a novelist, and he's telling the stories of this one particular man, Paul Fogarty, who was a Vietnam veteran, and he carries the battle scars and the guilty traditions of not being able to go with his brethren to the other side in the war. And that's, I think, a very telling part about this book. And I want to talk to Dan now about how he got to the point of putting this down on paper, and what he thinks other authors should do. And so let me start by asking Dan, what was going through your head when, like, a couple of weeks before you started writing this thing? Talk about the process of putting that first pen to paper and your first ideas to put this thing into word form.
Well, a lot of the stories, of course, in the firehouse, you're sitting there, you're telling stories, this and that. And I was always a good VS artist. Everybody told me that. So people say, do what you're good at. So apparently I'm good at that. But I started writing the book when I was in Saudi Arabia because we had some downtime. You had 4 days on, 4 days off. And my friend, who I work with, my partner, brilliant guy, he said, Dan, you should put this on paper. And basically that's what I started doing. And I threw out so many chapters when I started writing. It was garbage. But you know what? The garbage was getting better and better and better, and I liked it. So it took on a life of its own. You got to write. You got to write every day. You got to discipline yourself. Anytime you see anything that says write, they're telling you the truth. You got to write. Yeah. And you got to read. One of the things I like about the Authors Exchange is I never would have picked up the Cathy's novel. I never would have picked your novel up, Chris, because I'm not a dystopian political guy. Yeah. Okay. And no way I would have. No way in the world I would have bought that book on poetry, which I love. Okay. And I just ordered the Wizard book, the
Destiny Revealed, last week's guest. Yeah.
So one of the things I like is that, hey, I'm reading different genres that I never even attempted to read before. And you know what? I've learned so much, okay, from reading other forms, and I wouldn't have done that without this.
Oh, yeah? Well, maybe that leads us into our final question, because we're coming up on the end right now. But advice to new authors. You talk about reading multiple genres, and is that making you a better author? What do you think new authors should be doing?
I think it's like a runner. I'm still a runner. I mean, I haven't been able to run much lately, but I'm still a runner, and I'm still trying to improve as a runner. I'm constantly trying to improve as a runner. One of the things I learned as a runner, especially a long distance runner, is that everybody says, how could you be out there so long alone? But George C. in the Guru of Running said, you know what? For a solitary sport, running is the most team support I've ever seen. When you're writing, you're sitting alone in front of your computer and you're thinking, this is garbage, blah, blah, blah. When you have authors like runners supporting you that are sitting there reading and doubting, now somebody's reading your work. Now somebody's saying, hey, that's great. Or maybe you should try this. That's what I like, Chris. And what you started here is going to blow up immensely. There's no doubt in my mind, because this is something that has been needed for a long, long time. And I like the fact that You want people that are published authors, because whether they self-published or got a publisher or they have published a book, it shows they have the stick-to-itiveness and the ability to say, hey, I'm a writer and I'm putting it out there and here you go. It's hard to do. It's hard to put your life out there.
Well, they say one of the hardest things to sailing around the world, and obviously, my background's in sailing and all that kind of stuff. One of the hardest things to sailing around the world is getting off the dock. I would extend that to say the hardest thing to writing a book is writing the first sentence. And once you start doing it, and once you get over the self-doubt, and you get over the it's going to suck, I can't do it. What about chapter 12? I can't get past chapter 1. Get past that stuff and just start doing it on a daily basis. And the nice part about paper is you can throw it out if it doesn't work, or you can edit it, or you can do all kinds of good stuff, but getting that first words on the paper and getting it happen. And I'm so glad that you did, sir, and you got the chance to put this story together, because I think it's a very important tale. And I think eventually it's going to wind up in some very important places in the United States, because it talks about a very troubled time and a very troubled generation in Paul Fogarty. And I think you really ought to take a bow for this one. This is a nice book.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just want to leave you with this. I've run over 1,000 races, and I've never, ever in my life heard a runner or said myself, I love that first mile.
Ain't that the truth? I blew my knees out, so I don't run as much anymore, but getting the shoes on and getting out onto the road on a freezing morning in December is one of the hardest things you can ever possibly do. And I think it equates to writing that first chapter or getting off the dock. It's all the same, isn't it?
Absolutely. You're right on the mark on that one, Chris.
Hey, Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. This is a great way to get your book out there. If you're an author and you want to be heard and you want to tell your story, send us an email, info@thechartedlife.net. Join us on the Authors Exchange on Facebook. We now have an Authors Exchange on Goodreads as well. And obviously we have this podcast. So if you'd like to get involved with all those things, shoot me an email, go to our website, thechartedlife.net, send us a form link through there. You can do that as you like. And Dan, your book is available on all the major resources right now. I had no problem finding your book. It's also on Kindle. Is it free for download on Kindle?
I believe it said free. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So,
yeah.
If you do have the Kindle app and you do want to just check the book out, you're going to read the first 10 chapters and say, why did Chris put me through this? He's a mean, or why did he do that? And he did it because it's an important book and you need to read this book. And I can't more wholeheartedly recommend the read of Save the Tomatoes for Packy. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for watching, and make sure you tune in each week, Fridays at noon, available at all of your major resources for downloading podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Captain Chris German for the Authors Exchange, and this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for playing along. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.